Now here's something. Baltic amber is one of the most common resins found in the world. The reason for this is that due to the vast forests of pine, their numerous deposits are so common they provide wonderful treasures from long ago. Ants are especially common in the Baltic amber, which comes from pine trees. Its resin is rich in sugar, so the ants often live amongst the trees, close to the easy source of food. One block found in East Germany has preserved one ant that is estimated to be about 48 million years old. Think of the birthday cake. But what makes this find interesting is another animal inside the amber. It's a mite, notorious hunters in the insect world, capable of traveling at great speed. These guys quickly latch onto their hosts, sucking them dry. They're also capable of destroying entire hives in one go. And within this piece of amber, the amber provides a display of their final struggle. In Southeast Asia, feathers belonging to something unique have been found from 80 million years ago. They were captured in resin during the Cretaceous period, a peak time for dinosaurs. The many feathers inside are from the Coelurosaur. It looks like a dinosaur, but this animal is more related to birds. Other feathers like this have been found in resin. They belong to avian and other non-flying dinosaurs. The discoveries have helped reimagine what dinosaurs actually look like. Still, dinosaurs may have had feathers instead of being completely bald. Of course, for most of them, the feathers weren't used for flying, but they helped the dinos stay warm. However, the feathers weren't all that was found, and a part of the Coelurosaur's tail is also preserved. Still, it's so small and ancient that its DNA hasn't survived to map their entire genome. The enclosed tail is also very delicate, and it can't be removed from its protective amber shell. But although these findings can only be observed, they've still provided a great insight in the evolution of birds. But how does amber preserve things so effectively, even at the initial stages? The trees produce the resin to protect any small gaps in the bark against feeding insects. Its antiseptic nature and lack of water content ensures it doesn't degrade for a long time. This also makes it more resilient as it petrifies over long periods, eventually becoming a fossil. Some of the oldest amber ever found was from the Triassic period, showing how long it can last. The pieces from Italy are about 230 million years old. And inside one of these ancient droplets holds the oldest arthropod ever recorded. This mite found inside has provided a broader understanding to their evolution. Today, they're known to mainly annoy gardeners by feeding on the petals of flowering plants. However, at the time the mite was caught, flowers didn't have any petals, and it would be without this tasty meal for another 100 million years. Now, 100 million years ago, Myanmar was part of Gondwana, the great supercontinent. At that time, Myanmar wasn't part of Asia yet. But it was still lush with a great forest, which contained many species of lizards that lived amongst the undergrowth, hiding away from dinosaurs. Many of them have been stored within amber. This fact helped discover ancestors of geckos and chameleons. By using CT scans, scientists have analyzed them, providing a glimpse into the formation of their scales, teeth, feet, and claws. It also provided an understanding of how these archaic creatures once appeared. Although mostly pieces of lizards, by using modern technology, the scientists have been able to create 3D images of the lizard. These images can reveal how those guys appeared in their full form. The images show that they still retain some of their exact features to this day, like the chameleon's sticky pads used for climbing. A salamander fossil from around 20 million years ago is one of the most intact specimens ever found in amber. Details of its final moments show that it had been attacked before getting stuck in the resin. However, what's confusing about this find from the Miocene era is that the amber was found in the Caribbean, but it came from a tree that's closer related to those from East Africa. The lizard also has ancestry from the same area. Finds like this have opened a whole new understanding about how these small lizards migrated. It's expected that they would have ridden fallen logs, which took them across the seas to new homelands, not only to the Caribbean, but to all continents except for Antarctica. Nobody goes there, it's too cold. In the Dominican Republic, you can find some of the rarest of all ambers. This Dominican amber came from neotropical forests from around 20 million years ago. Many of the trees that made the resin are now extinct. The amber is almost completely see-through and can come in an array of beautiful colors. The most common colors are red, yellow, and even blue, and are easily mistaken for gemstones. One was found with a flea caught in it, dating to when the forest was at its peak and the mammalian variety thrived. Fleas were likely common at the time, and this flea in particular had recently fed on a mammal before getting stuck. However, something more intriguing was found within the flea. While scientists checked what mammal DNA was within the flea, they found that it was carrying an ancient bacterial blight. These blights have been constant throughout Earth's history, dramatically decreasing populations of animals and plants. This now extinct blight in the amber helped scientists determine how much the bacteria have evolved and how it spread. Now, most remnants of insects inside amber aren't much more than the exoskeleton bodies. But with some found in Myanmar, they were so well preserved that even the color of the insects is still intact. Colors in nature appear in three different ways. The first is bioluminescence, that's produced by a chemical reaction within a living organism. The second is about pigments, where the color appears in an animal or a plant tissue. The third is called structural coloration, and the production of colors here is explained by microscopic surfaces fine enough to react with the light. The rare insects in amber were found in the form of structural coloration, but only at specific wavelengths. It all explains the very intense colors rarely found. 99 million years later, these bugs can still show their vibrant colors – blue, purple, and green. Some of them appear so different in color and shape that they almost look like they're from another world. Which of course they are, a very old one. Ants have been around for about 168 million years, based on fossil evidence provided. They're well known for their social hierarchies and their hive mind system. They've dominated almost every corner of the insect world, but when these social capabilities came about have been difficult to determine. Yet, recently, amber dated from 100 million years ago has shed some light into their evolution. Several amber pieces have preserved various ant types, including the worker ants, guardian or soldier ants, and even a queen ant. Before these pieces were found, it was estimated their social nature occurred millions of years later. A piece of amber dated 100 million years ago helped shed light on the evolution of birds. A perfectly preserved bird that hatched preserved in amber was already equipped with its flight feathers. With the earlier physical abilities, they would be capable of moving around the nest by themselves at a very young age, and it's expected they could search for their own food almost immediately. But as birds continue to evolve and spend more time in the skies, their brain developed larger for their cognitive abilities. After hatching, their early development was then more focused on the brain, and the chicks slowly became more reliant on their parents over time. In Spain, a massive treasure trove of amber and other fossils has been found. Inside, there were remnants of an entire ecosystem that existed 110 million years ago. A bunch of individual fossils were found. The vast collection includes many types of insects, mollusks, arachnids, plants, 50 different dinosaur bone fragments, feathers, and hair from mammals, and a McDonald's burger wrapper. Nah, just kidding. With the abundance of findings, it's helped researchers understand the ancient terrestrial ecosystem that once existed. With loads of specific details of the environment, they've reconstructed the swamp. This way, it's now possible to experience what it was like in the world of dinosaurs.
Something exciting and kinda unexpected popped out among the rocks of the Ica Valley in Peru. The bones of a really old whale that lived almost 40 million years ago. At first, no one was really impressed because the bones they found were big and weirdly shaped, so people just thought they were looking at giant boulders. I mean, that's cool too, but things got way better when they realized those were the remains of a very large ancient animal that roamed along the coast of ancient Peru. Plus, it was probably the heaviest creature that ever lived. Sorry, blue whale, I know you worked hard to get to the top. The length of over 100 feet and weight of more than 200 tons brought you the status of the biggest animal on our planet. But it seems you've held the title long enough. Time to hand it over to our next candidate, and that one's really gigantic. This ocean beast was probably shorter than the blue whale, but heavier, with a weight that could be between 93 tons and 370 tons. If it's closer to the higher number, it'll make Prehistoric the biggest animal ever known to have lived on Earth. And it seems its weight was the result of having extremely thick, dense bones. You can see such bones today in manatees or some other early whales. Dense bones are a great tool for such marine mammals. This feature makes them heavy and allows them to stay submerged most of the time. But at the same time, if their body was too heavy, they would end up sinking all the time, and they would waste too much energy to move back up to the surface. So, to avoid sinking, marine mammals need to have enough lighter tissues, like muscles and fat, to help them float in the water without using too much energy. Now, scientists didn't have the whole skeleton, which makes it hard to tell how big the animal was. But they used the ratio of the heavy bones to the lighter tissues in other marine mammals to estimate the overall weight of this giant ancient whale. Experts found these fossils about 13 years ago and spent the next decade freeing the whale from the rock. Its anatomy and age showed this whale was a cousin of Basilosaurus, a whale that had a long snout full of sharp teeth, and a sleek body similar to that of an eel. Even if Prehistoric wasn't bigger than the blue whale, it was still a giant that ruled the ocean depths. Unlike modern whales, there's a possibility that this ancient fellow was a predator that liked to go after bigger prey. And this also changes how we see the history of whales. Scientists used to think these magnificent creatures became really big about 5 million years ago when they started eating lots of small creatures. But here's the proof that giant whales existed even before that. But it's still unclear how this whale managed to find enough food to sustain its enormous body. Plus, it's still hard to tell what exactly this ancient creature had on its menu. It was pretty large and not such a fast swimmer, so it's possible it searched for food in shallow waters. Then it probably ate crustaceans, clams, or some other small animals hiding in the sand. One theory says it was a scavenger, which basically means it munched on remains of everything that would come its way. It's not so unusual to find marine animals in deserts. Many of these regions used to be covered with water anyway. The Sahara in Africa is a perfect example. About 50 to 100 million years ago, this was not a dry desert, but a shallow saltwater body called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. The land is not wet there anymore, of course, but people who lived in that area knew about it because they used to find old shells across the desert. The sea was about 164 feet deep. That sounds enough for a nice swim. Some would say this area looked like modern Puerto Rico, with lots of sun and shallow water. Mangrove forests were a common thing as well as seafloors covered with mollusks, like snails and clams. The marine sediment that was left behind after the sea had dried up is full of different fossils. And the animal that lived in that ancient underwater world didn't look friendly. Plus, they were much bigger than their relatives from modern times, so a regular-sized human would end up as a snack, not even a whole meal. Normally, when animals live on small islands, they can become much bigger than their relatives from the mainland. This is something we call island gigantism, and it happens because there are more resources or fewer predators on islands. Maybe the same thing happened in the Trans-Saharan Seaway. Even though it wasn't an actual island, the water moved in and out, which created little pockets of water. And specific conditions in these pockets might have helped animals grow bigger. So we're talking about giant sea snakes, catfish, and fish that no longer exist today. One had incredibly strong jaws, and the animal used them to eat hard things and even crush shells. Their teeth showed they were fierce predators other animals had every reason to be afraid of. They went through some changes when it came to diet, similar to some types of piranhas. And the competition to get to the top of the food chain wasn't a joke. Not when there were also such large predators as sharks, crocodiles, and ancient relatives of elephants. Sahara went through different phases. If you could use a time machine and take a peek at Earth's largest hot desert as it was about 6,000 years ago, you wouldn't have to struggle with sand and heat. You'd have a nice walk through a green and pretty lush place. In the past, people who lived in that area didn't leave drawings on cave walls that showed camels, sand dunes, and scorpions. All those things you'd see in today's Sahara. Instead, they drew crocodiles. That's additional evidence that the Sahara used to have a lot of water and plants enough to support these big yet scary animals. Around 3 billion years ago, Earth might have been mostly covered with water. Today, it's about 71% of its surface, but it seems that our planet used to be a giant ocean world with no continents at all, just some scattered islands. Scientists studied special rocks in Western Australia that formed in a place deep under the ocean called a hydrothermal vent system. To explain this better, it's important to mention two common oxygen types, O16 and O18. O18 is heavier because it has extra neutrons. O16 evaporates from water more easily, and as researchers studied an old ocean floor, they found a lot of O18, more than in today's oceans. This way, they realized ancient Earth had less dry land than Earth today. Australia is a good spot to conduct these studies because a long time ago, it also used to be a beautiful place with large animals and lush rainforests. But as time went by, the land became drier and Australia had more deserts formed, such as the Great Victoria Desert. Rainforest remained only on the edges of the continent. What happens with deserts across the globe is called desertification. That's when land that used to be good for growing things turns into a desert or something similar. Our planet changes over time, together with its climate. But desertification also happens because of human activities, like mining, farming, and building cities. And when land turns into a desert, it's a problem because it can't support people and animals anymore. Food doesn't grow there. There's not enough clean water, and animals lose their homes. To help with this problem, there's a plan many countries agreed to. They decided to work with farmers to take care of the land, fix damaged areas, and manage water better. All in all, to make our planet a better place for life. You decided to go scuba diving for the first time. The water is clear and the sun is shining on the seabed. You take a few selfies and the fish swimming by when suddenly, the ocean goes pitch black. You look up and, oh my, what is that gigantic animal? It's definitely not a shark, not a whale. Is it a turtle? Yup, but fear not, it's not gonna hurt you. If you had lived on this same Earth about 72 million years ago, then maybe this could have really happened to you. Scientists have recently found the fossils of a gigantic marine turtle that could have grown as big as 12 feet. If you don't have any idea of how big that is, let's see some examples. That's the average length of a hippopotamus, 6 golden retrievers, or 2 Michael Jordans stacked on top of each other. The turtle's scientific name is an homage to that old-school sea monster called Leviathan. Maybe you remember this from old-school history lessons. The Leviathan is supposedly a mythical creature that would swallow entire ships or people that were deemed too greedy by the creature. Can you imagine being swallowed by this humongous sea turtle? No, thank you. The fossils of this gigantic creature began to be excavated between 2016 and 2021, all the way in northeastern Spain. The first fossil was located by a hiker in the Spanish Pyrenees, and it was around 8 inches long. The pelvis of this turtle alone measured around 35 inches. It would definitely be one of the biggest turtles today if it hadn't gone extinct. FYI, the largest living sea turtles today can reach up to 6 feet in length, which is already pretty big. Now, how about a gigantic prehistoric scorpion? I bet most people here are not huge fans of these creatures, especially since they're poisonous, which is why the thought of a 9-foot-long aquatic scorpion might be the stuff of nightmares. Let's just say that if they hadn't gone extinct some 400 million years ago, lakes and rivers would be much more dangerous places for humans today. These gigantic insects were considered to be apex predators in their time, hunting everything from fish to other animals, even of their own kind. Yikes! I got goosebumps just imagining these creatures. Should we thank the asteroid that hit our planet now or later on in this video? Another prehistoric animal that would shock humans if it were still alive is the so-called Megatherium, a gigantic sloth. This huge sloth is believed to have grown up to 20 feet long, and its weight could be up to 8,000 pounds. It was found in the woodlands and grasslands of South America. The creature used to stand on its 2 feet in order to reach leaves on high branches. These giant sloths had huge claws. They helped them climb trees. I gotta say, I feel uncomfortable imagining these elephant-sized sloths climbing trees. Oh, of course, some dinosaurs will make our super-sized creatures list. But before that, here's a fun fact. Did you know some dinosaurs are still alive today? Scientists have proven that birds are classified as theropod dinosaurs. Such infamous creatures as the T-Rex and Velociraptor belonged to this group. I'm sure you've heard these names even before you watched Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor is that scary dino that breaks into the kitchen. Well, they evolved, gained some feathers, and turned into various species of birds we know today. That means that any bird from chickens to those little blue ones is a direct descendant of dinosaurs. Now, does the name Spinosaurus ring a bell? You can see this huge dinosaur in some museums today. Its fossils, I mean. The Spinosaurus was one of the biggest land predators to walk Earth. Actually, to walk its land and water, since scientists believe that this dino was semi-aquatic. It fed mostly on meat, which means humans would be its natural prey if it lived today. This meat-eating dino lived around 90 to 100 million years ago. It was about 60 feet long, 12 feet high, and weighed up to 22 tons. Its head was around the size of 8 bowling balls and was shaped like a crocodile's face. Basically, the Spinosaurus was a big African elephant with the face of a crocodile. Just kidding. But that would look funny though, wouldn't it? A much more attractive dino was this guy. It's considered to be the largest dinosaur that has ever lived on our planet. What made it so big was its extremely long neck and very long tail. You wouldn't want to stand behind this creature, believe me. If it decided to swish its tail, you'd get catapulted very far away. This creature lived around 100 million years ago, and its fossils were first found in Argentina around 2012. The dino measured 120 feet from head to tail, which made it almost as big as an American football field in width. And have I mentioned it weighed almost as much as a space shuttle? A staggering 75 tons. If it had been a carnivore, it would have probably been the greatest predator. But this big guy was a peaceful herbivore that had such a long neck that it could eat leaves from high trees. Cute, right? We must also talk about the Shastasaurus. As the name suggests, this animal is popularly known as the Mount Shasta lizard. Even though it was a marine reptile and probably never set foot on the mountain itself, this dino was usually around 23 feet long, but there was a specific strand of this species that could get as big as 69 feet long, about the size of the great blue whale. This made it the biggest marine reptile to have ever lived. A fun fact about the Shastasaurus is that scientists believe it didn't even have teeth. which means it could only feed on soft-bodied prey, such as squid, for example. The next animal on our list is the blue whale. Believe it or not, the biggest living animal on Earth actually started small. These days, the average mature blue whale can reach up to 100 feet in length and weigh up to 200 tons. That's more or less the weight of 40 elephants put together, or 30 Tyrannosaurus rexes, or 2,670 average-sized people. Blue whales have to eat up to 50 million calories per day to support that body. That's the equivalent of 30,000 Big Macs, just FYI. But blue whales weren't always this big. They actually evolved from a four-legged mammal that lived on Earth around 48 million years ago. Their ancestor was called Pakicetus, and it was only 6 feet long. Here's a fun fact. To be able to live in the water as one does today, the blue whale had to go through some intense adaptations. A blue whale can replace up to 80 to 90% of oxygen in its lungs each time it takes a breath. A human replaces only up to 15% for comparison. It allows these animals to dive for up to 1 hour at a time, down to a staggering depth of 330 feet. Elephants were bound to make the list. Elephants are currently the largest land animals on Earth. They can grow to be about 13 feet tall and weigh up to 7 tons. That's pretty small if we compare it to the other animals that once lived on Earth, right? But if we placed a 6-foot-tall human next to an elephant, we'll see it's not at all that small. African elephants are bigger than their close relatives, Asian elephants, and they have a similar lifespan to humans, up to 70 years. Pokemon might have made us collectively wish that salamanders were real-life dragons, although they're not. They can still be pretty cool, though. There's a giant species of salamander that is known to be the largest living amphibian. They can grow to be as long as a regular-sized human, reaching up to 6 feet. I bet that wouldn't be a pleasant underwater encounter.
Well, there you are. The sun is scorching, you're thirsty. All you can think about is water and ancient bones under your feet. You're wandering through the Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth. Right now, you're crossing a stretch of sand called Whale Valley. And all over these 75 square miles of land, fossils cover the ground so thickly that you can't help but step on them. Paleontologist Hesham Salam says it's an unusual picture in this place. The bones are poking right out of the cliffs, as if they're calling to you to come check them out. You can spot ribs scattered all over the place. Look at these vertebrae. They're giant. Ooh, the creature they once belonged to must have been up to 65 feet long. The fossils show that the animal had a streamlined body like today's whale, but still had features like hind legs and feet. For scientists, it means a very exciting thing. They might have discovered a fully intact skeleton of a prehistoric whale. It was an animal that lived in this area when Egypt was underwater. You see, today, the Valley of the Whales is the world's largest ancient whale graveyard. You're likely wondering what marine animals are doing in a desert more than 100 miles away from the nearest coast. Well, millions of years ago, this desert was at the bottom of a massive ocean called the Tethys, which stretched from Europe to India. When sea levels dropped, the ocean left behind a seabed covered with fossils. And today, the fossils of some of the earliest known whales rest here, which gives researchers a peek into how today's massive ocean whales may have evolved. The fossils here are super detailed, even with some stomach contents still intact. Uh-oh. Scientists have also found fossils of ancient sharks, crocodiles, and turtles, helping to recreate what this marine world looked like millions of years ago. Now, the first whale bones were discovered in 1902, but it wasn't until the 1980s that people really started to explore the area, only when access to this area became better. Sadly, some fossils had been taken away by collectors before the site turned into a protected area. Most of the fossils are just under the surface, slowly revealed by erosion. Whale Valley gives us an amazing glimpse into millions of years of ancient coastal marine life. But let's move further. Ancient whale fossils aren't the only discovery you're going to make today. For over 150 years, scientists have been puzzled by a strange creature that lived millions of years ago. But now, thanks to some amazing fossils found in Morocco, they've finally figured it out. Look at them. These creatures are called blah blah blah. Nah, I'm kidding. Stylophorans. They look like flattened armor with a long arm sticking out. Researchers discovered these creatures in 2014 and were shocked. The fossils dated back around 478 million years. They found around 450 specimens, and to their surprise, some even had soft tissues preserved, which is super rare. Before this, they only knew stylophorans from their hard parts. Originally, scientists thought these creatures were good old echinoderms, animals like sea urchins and starfish. But new discoveries prove that they had a core body and feeding arm, similar to modern starfish, complete with a water vascular system to help them move and eat. This finding ends a long debate about where stylophorans fit in the animal family tree. Now we know they're related to echinoderms, but are more advanced because they don't have the typical 5-ray symmetry. Ooh, come here and look at this giant fossil. It was found in the Sahara and gave scientists new insights into the Spinosaurus, the largest carnivorous dinosaur we know about. These 95 million-year-old remains also confirm that it was the first known swimming dinosaur. The Spinosaurus had flat paddle-like feet and nostrils on the top of its crocodile-like head, perfect for staying underwater. It was a pretty weird dinosaur with a long neck, trunk, tail, and a 7-foot sail on its back, so it must have spent a lot of time in the water. At over 50 feet long, Spinosaurus might have been even larger than T-Rex. The first Spinosaurus remains were discovered about 100 years ago in Egypt, but only this new fossil, found in Morocco, helped scientists reconstruct this dinosaur for the first time. Researchers paid attention to the creature's shorter hind limbs and wide claws. These features point to adaptations for life in the water. Its snout and dense bones also suggest it was a swimmer, while its spiked tail likely attracted mates. Hey, good looking, come here often? And here's another astonishing find made in Tunisia, the remains of Machimosaurus rex. Now, so far it's believed to be the biggest crocodile ever. This ancient croc was about 32 feet long and weighed around 66,000 pounds. It was a top predator around 130 million years ago, and its skull was over 5 feet long. Now, this discovery is a big deal because it shows that these crocs stuck around longer than we thought. Before this, scientists believed that they disappeared during a minor extinction event between the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Now, let's go back to the fact that the Sahara was once underwater, and some of the largest sea creatures ever lived there. A study published in the Bulletin of the American Museum of Natural History speaks about an ancient body of water called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. It existed between 150 million years ago, covering parts of Western Africa. Scientists spent 2 decades trying to recreate this prehistoric underwater world. They found it was warm and shallow, home to some pretty terrifying creatures, including 5-foot-long catfish and 40-foot-long sea snakes. Yikes! The seaway was cut off from larger oceans for long stretches, which may have helped these predators grow larger because resources were always available. It's a classic case of evolution at work, leading to what scientists call gigantism in isolated environments. But all that water didn't just disappear with no trace. Under the sands of the Sahara, scientists have discovered a massive ancient lake, which they're calling a megalake. Makes sense? This lake formed around 250,000 years ago when the Nile River flooded the eastern Sahara. At its biggest, this lake covered over 42,000 square miles. It's about half as big as Kansas. They also found evidence of a smaller lake, 93 miles west of the Nile, at a slightly lower level and covering 18,600 square miles. All of this adds to growing evidence that once, North Africa had many lakes that might have created migration routes, helping early humans move across the continent. Now, in the Sahara, you can find not only fossils of bizarre animals. In May 2020, some weird rocks with greenish crystals were discovered in a sandy region in southern Algeria's Sahara Desert. When scientists checked them out, they found out these rocks weren't from Earth. They were actually pieces of a meteorite called Erg-Chek 002. This meteorite is super old, like the oldest volcanic rock ever found. It melted ages ago in the fiery heart of an ancient protoplanet that no longer exists. Researchers had recently published a study in Nature Communications, revealing that they have analyzed lead and uranium isotopes in Erg-Chek 002 and found out it's more than 4.5 billion years old. Another cool discovery made in the Sahara is quite unexpected. A few years ago, scientists found what they think are the world's oldest colors, and they're bright pink. These pigments were uncovered from rocks that are around 1.1 billion years old in the Sahara Desert. The colors came from microscopic organisms, as animals didn't exist back then. The discovery was made by a PhD student who crushed the ancient rocks and analyzed the pigments. These pink pigments are actually ancient chlorophyll from photosynthetic organisms that lived in an ocean that's long gone. Researchers are now sure that this finding could help explain why larger, complex creatures showed up much later in Earth's history. Before these colors were discovered, scientists didn't know what was missing in the food chain that delayed the evolution of larger animals. Now they understand that tiny cyanobacteria were at the bottom of that chain. Apparently, this discovery is not just about finding some old pink stuff. Scientists believe it's a breakthrough in understanding the history of life on Earth. Recently, scientists made an astonishing discovery that might solve Stonehenge's mystery. They found something hidden deep within the DNA of Stonehenge's sarsen rocks, the huge monolithic ones, and it might reveal why our Neolithic ancestors designed and built this thing in the first place. Over the years, scientists have been scratching their heads trying to figure out where the huge sarsen rocks came from. For years, they believed they came from a quarry just 15 miles away from the site, known as Marlborough Downs. At this site, they found similar minerals to the ones that make up the sarsen rocks. But it turned out there was more to this story than they thought. The understanding of how Stonehenge was built is always changing. Scientists need to really travel back in time to uncover its mysteries. Where did the rocks come from? How were they carried? Why was the site built? You see, the Stonehenge site, located at Salisbury Plain in England, is made up of two main types of stone. There are the super heavy sarsens and the lighter and smaller bluestones. The sarsens each weigh about 25 tons. That's as much as 3 African elephants stacked together. The heaviest sarsen stone, called the heel stone, weighs 30 tons all by itself. Together, the sarsens make that iconic outer ring circle. Inside that circle, that's where you'll find the bluestones. The naming might seem a bit misleading since they're not really blue. They have a bluish tinge to them when they are freshly broken, hence the name. These smaller rocks probably came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, which is about 150 miles away from Stonehenge. They're a bit lighter than the sarsens, but still pretty heavy. The altar stone, which is classified as a bluestone, is the heaviest one, weighing around 6 tons. Its original location still isn't known for sure. To figure out where a rock came from, scientists first have to study their composition. This is like checking the rock's DNA. Then they cross-reference the structure of the rock with minerals in the soil to see if it's a match. Most of the sarsens we see around southern England are actually made of a type of sandstone known as silcrete. Think of silcrete as sand that's been hardened by underground water processes over millions of years. This process mostly happened during a period called the Paleogene, about 65 to 23 million years ago. These sarsen rocks didn't form in one big slab, but in patches, like nature leaving little rock gardens all over the place. Scientists reason the sarsens spread out randomly, forming in isolated pockets. Over time, many were buried under layers of clay and chalk, which helped preserve them. When ancient builders were on the lookout for materials, these sarsens must have looked perfect for something impressive like Stonehenge. Actually, sarsens have been used in everything, from Roman villas to medieval churches, and even in things like road curbs and old field walls. One could say these rocks were the it material for ancient builders, and continue to be popular even into more modern times. This fact made scientists start wondering that maybe not all sarsen stones that were used to build Stonehenge came from the same place. They've identified sarsen sites all over the UK, in places such as Oxfordshire and Kent. After hundreds of years of studying the sarsens, geologists finally had the right type of technology to determine the origin of the stones. Now, I wish I could tell you that it was some undisclosed location very far away from the site. But, as it turned out, the sarsens were originally from Westwoods, the forest near Stonehenge. A new factor came into play when excavations uncovered empty stone holes, showing that at least 6 bluestone pillars were removed from a Pressley Hills site called Wan Main in Prehistoric. They had a stone circle over there, and it's believed that some of Stonehenge's rocks were recycled rocks from this more ancient circle. If this is true, it might be that Stonehenge is part of a much larger landscape of ancient sites. If this is the case, then Stonehenge is just the cherry on top of a much larger scale project. Think of it as the sacred centerpiece of an entire landscape of monuments, mounds, stone circles, and things. This is why scientists want to find out where the rocks came from so badly. It could lead to why and how Stonehenge was built. Now, Stonehenge didn't just pop up overnight. It was built in several stages over hundreds of years. It's likely that it wasn't a single unified vision, but more like a big community project that evolved over time. With each generation, the builders brought in their own ideas, creating a stone structure that would last for ages. The first stage was around 3100 BCE. That's when people dug out a circular ditch and likely set up some bluestones as sort of a starter ring. Later, they added the sarsens and even topped some of them with horizontal stones to form those famous arches you see today, also known as the trilithons. These ancient builders had some challenges on their hands. How would they move the rocks? There's an old theory known as the ice road that suggests that the rocks were moved by natural icy pathways that formed during the winter. This way, they could slide the rocks down all the way to Stonehenge. But hey, if we're talking about a distance of over 100 miles, that's not too realistic. Anyways, this theory was debunked because it was warmer back then than it is today. There's also the river theory, which suggests that the rocks were floated along the river from the quarry to the site. But if we're talking about sarsen rocks, they're too heavy to float. So there goes that theory. What we're saying is, no one knows how the rocks were moved. Another interesting science tidbit came from all the research done in Stonehenge. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed the different stone working methods used, and has shown that some of the parts of the monument were more carefully finished than others. In particular, the northeast side and the inner faces of the central trilithons were finely dressed. FYI, a trilithon is one of Stonehenge's most famous shapes. It's when 2 huge monoliths receive a third one on top of them, connecting the 2 together. This fancy word is simply Greek for having 3 stones. But anyways, the bigger question, and the reason Stonehenge is so famous, is why it was built in the first place. Theories are all over the place, and some sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi show. So, here's a rundown of the most popular ideas. There's, of course, the solar calendar theory. This one supposes that the stones are aligned with the movements of the sun, especially during the summer and winter solstices. During the summer solstice, the sun rises to the left of the heel stone, that's the lone stone outside the main circle, lighting up the entire monument. Some say it's the ancient version of a calendar, marking the year's longest and shortest days. Some archaeologists think Stonehenge might have been an ancient healing center. Pieces of bluestone have been found chipped away, possibly by people who believed they had healing powers. The theory goes that people traveled from all over to come to Stonehenge in hopes of a cure for whatever was ailing them. There's also some speculation that Stonehenge was the place to be. Think of it as an ancient gathering spot. Some evidence suggests that communities from distant areas traveled to Stonehenge for gatherings, feasts, and ceremonies. Studies of bones found near the site show they came from all over Britain, making it a sort of prehistoric meetup location.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That would be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop Man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop Brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boskops spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Kasarabe people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Kasarabi people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on trade goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world. And it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching.
It happened 66 million years ago. Hey, it could have been September. A massive asteroid slammed into Earth, bringing along chaos and devastation. The tragic aftermath of the terrifying collision led to the extinction of dinosaurs. Yes, I'm talking about the Chicxulub asteroid that left a massive crater in Mexico. and changed life on Earth forever. And now, it turns out it wasn't the only cosmic rock to hit our planet during that time. Scientists have just confirmed there was another asteroid. This second space rock wasn't as big as Chicxulub, but it still packed a punch. It crashed to the ground off the coast of West Africa, smashing into the ocean and leaving a crater called the Nader crater. And tell you what, it wasn't a small splash. The impact was so powerful, it triggered a whole tsunami. It was more than 2,600 feet high, almost as high as the Burj Khalifa, the tallest man-made structure in the world. But how did we come to the conclusion that there was a second impact? Well, this researcher spotted the Nader crater in 2022. Dr. Nicholson was looking for some high-tech scans of the ocean floor when he noticed a massive 5.5-mile-wide depression under almost 1,000 feet of water. Well, he thought it could be an asteroid impact crater, but at the time, the evidence he had wasn't solid. But now, scientists have confirmed that this is the real deal. A second asteroid did hit Earth during the dinosaur extinction era. Now, let's see how they figured all this out. For one thing, there were those super high-resolution 3D seismic images. They allowed researchers to peel back layers of the ocean floor and get a crystal-clear look at the crater. It was like going from a blurry old ultrasound to the kind of 3D scans where you can see every little feature. Their findings confirm that the crater was left by an asteroid, somewhere between 1,500 to 1,640 feet wide. And it didn't just create a hole in the ground. The impact was so intense that it produced a central peak, formed escalating ridges around the crater, and even left a damage zone that stretched out for thousands of miles. Using those super detailed images, the scientists have managed to reconstruct what happened right after the asteroid hit the surface of our planet. First, it slammed into the ocean, creating an initial bowl-shaped crater. As the shockwave spread, the seabed was shaken so violently that it triggered landslides, and the soft sediment surrounding the crater collapsed inward, creating a noticeable brim. As you already know, the impact also triggered a tsunami, and it was so shockingly powerful that its waves didn't just go outward, they actually turned back towards the crater, leaving huge scars on the ocean floor. And this wasn't just one big wave. No, it was a whole series of them, a train of tsunamis smashing everything in their path. Now, this second asteroid impact is a huge deal for scientists. It's a rare opportunity to study a marine impact crater in such incredible detail. There are only about 20 confirmed marine craters in the world, and none of them have been captured with this level of precision before. Plus, this data allows scientists to test new ideas about how craters form in water. You see, unlike craters on land, marine craters are hidden under layers of sediment, which makes them tricky to study. But with this new 3D imaging, we can look at the crater in all its layers. It's like slicing into a cake to see what's inside. Dr. Nicholson and his team are now dreaming of drilling into the crater and recovering samples from deep below the ocean floor. This would allow them to measure the shock pressure during the impact and figure out what happened in the minutes, hours, and days following the collision. Of course, the Chicxulub asteroid is still the star of the show when it comes to the dinosaurs' extinction. This space traveler was giant, somewhere between 6 and 9 miles wide. It hit Earth at a devastating angle, sending vaporized rock and gas into the atmosphere. It caused an impact winter that lasted for 15 years, because all that stuff blocked out the sun and plunged Earth into darkness. Now, probably the most intriguing thing is that some experts think the Nader asteroid might have been a chunk that had broken off from Chicxulub before it hit Earth. It's still just a theory, but if true, it could mean that Earth got hit by a double whammy from space. Now, let's travel back in time to the year 1908 in Siberia. Look around. You see nothing but trees and rivers. And suddenly, a huge object, around 150 to 300 feet in diameter, dashes through the Earth's atmosphere. Is it a comet? An asteroid? Scientists aren't sure. What they do know for sure is that this intruder blew up in the sky over Tunguska, leading to one of the most powerful blasts in recorded history. It completely leveled the forest below, knocking out 80 million trees over an area of around 830 square miles. And that's an area larger than that of cities like Los Angeles or New York. The trees were literally flattened, and their trunks were stripped of branches. They were also arranged in a bizarre radial pattern around the epicenter. But what if this explosion had happened over a city? Every single building would have been destroyed, and countless lives would have been lost. Luckily, this disaster occurred in a super remote part of Siberia. The creepiest thing, though? When scientists finally reached the area years later, they found no impact crater. No wonder it led to even more mystery. The most logical explanation is that when the object went off in the sky, probably around 3 to 6 miles above the ground, it blew up before it could hit the ground, and still, it didn't stop the blast from leveling an entire forest. Fast forward to 2013 and another mind-blowing event, this time over a much more populated area, the city of Chelyabinsk. It was a regular February morning when an asteroid about 60 feet in diameter entered Earth's atmosphere, lighting up the sky. It was moving at a staggering speed of around 43,000 miles per hour. It blew up in midair, about 18 miles above the city. It was a horrific view, but luckily, the asteroid disintegrated high enough in the atmosphere without hitting the ground. If it had touched down, the city would have been in big trouble, because even though there was no direct impact, the explosion still created a shockwave that tore through the atmosphere, hitting the ground with enough force to shatter windows all over the place. The blast damaged around 7,200 buildings, but fortunately, there were no direct fatalities. Still, it was a major wake-up call. This wasn't just some far-off cosmic event like Tunguska. This asteroid exploded over a modern populated area, and the damage was very real. The good news? Scientists are getting better at spotting such objects before they get too close. Space agencies around the world, like NASA, are tracking near-Earth objects to figure out which ones could pose a risk. But as we can see from these two events, sometimes space rocks can still sneak up on us. And while the chances of a major impact are low, the stakes are really high. At the moment, there's one asteroid that NASA's keeping an eye on. It's called Bennu, and it's about the same size as the Nader impactor. Bennu is considered one of the most hazardous objects in near-Earth orbit. According to NASA, there's a small chance it could hit the Earth between the years 2178 and 2290, and the biggest risk date is September 24, 2182. But don't freak out just yet. The odds of the impact are only 1 in 2,700. But still, it's a reminder that Earth is always in the cosmic firing line.
You are lost deep within the jungle in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There are strange noises all around you, and to make it worse, the sun is setting. Soon, you'll be alone in the middle of an unknown rainforest. Guess it was a pretty bad idea to come looking for El Dorado on your own, wasn't it? You keep walking as fast as you can when suddenly, wait! What's this you're seeing? It looks like large stairways made out of stone. This definitely doesn't look natural, so you take a picture. Maybe you didn't strike gold, but you might have just found something relevant. Congratulations! You found Akamtun, a long-lost Mayan city, hidden 37 miles into the jungle. The name literally translates to stone column. Stone was probably in at the time, so these guys used a lot of it to build their pyramids, houses, and even ball courts. If you ever thought that Europeans invented ball games, think twice. Mayans loved to play ball games for recreational purposes. Akamtun is part of a series of other long-lost Mayan cities that are being discovered with the help of new technology nowadays. We'll talk more about the other ones in a jiffy. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this one is that it was surrounded by wetlands, which is why the city was built on high ground. The city was monumental, covering an area of over 120 acres. That would be as big as 90 football fields right next to each other. Scientists have found proof that Akamtun had pyramids of up to 49 feet high, and that it was likely an important social hub between 250 and 1000 CE. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the 19th century. Modern technologies, such as LiDAR imaging, help archaeologists see through dense canopies of the forests. This means that people don't really have to risk getting lost in the tropical jungle like you did at the beginning of this video. LiDAR works sort of like an X-ray. It sends out laser beams that can detect any signs of ruins or ancient constructions. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parchak, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in South America, Egypt, and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any signs of where there could have been cities long ago. She says that more often than not, what happens is that ruins are covered by vegetation, soil, or sand, which makes them super tricky to find. But thanks to these awesome tools, scientists also made the huge discovery of ancient Mayan causeways, which spread throughout old Mayan territories. I mean, take a look at these roadways. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places such as Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130 feet wide roads painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime. Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these, and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan highways we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over the swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, it's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possible 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spiderweb, and from what archaeologists have gathered, this huge system of roads worked to connect a big system of economic and social interactions between Mayan cities. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 2000 BCE, was made of small, tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids, with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone to make them white. That's pretty cool, right? But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, experts believe that at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. And they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Mayans had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, and plazas. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. If you've ever seen examples of ancient Mayan cities, this is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan conquest state. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It's composed of a series of complex monuments. The North Acropolis is one of Tikal's most ancient complexes of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. Then there's Chichen Itza. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castillo, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. You can see that these folks were a pretty big deal, huh? That's why nobody can really understand what happened to them. there's a big lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? New research in 2017 did bring some new discoveries into the mix. Using data from a site at Ceibal, located at southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected demise of this great civilization. The information shows that instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. It's hard to pinpoint the exact causes, though. But hey, recent discoveries are shedding a big light on humanity's past. Not only about the Mayan Empire, but about other long-lost civilizations of South America. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done using satellite imaging technology and is also shocking scientists. Some images from near the Xingu River, also in the Amazon, suggest that cities of millions of people might have existed inside the jungle, way before our modern civilization ever existed. I mean, if this doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. Satellite imagery also detected a network of trenches, dating back to 200 and 1200 CE in the Bolivian Amazon forest. These proofs suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people right in the middle of the Amazon forest. When researchers from the University of Florida went on ground to check the satellite information, they were shocked to find several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans. Tunnels, metro, underground systems, and even secret passageways to the houses of the rich and famous. Why else do we need tunnels, you may wonder? To hide. Many cities have underground tunnels and even underground doppelgangers. Now let's make it clear. Those passages are normally not connected, contrary to the popular rumor claiming that it was possible to get from Scotland to Turkey using underground passageways built around 5,000 years ago. I mean, it sounds insane even today. Imagine building it back in the day. These tunnels have an official name, the Erdstall Tunnels, and they were most likely built in the Middle Ages. However, we still don't have the exact information about the date. The highest concentration of those tunnels are in Bavaria, Germany, but there are many of them in Great Britain and France too. Erdstall tunnels, a unique type of earthen passage found globally, are characterized by their narrow, oval-shaped corridors and tight choke points, known as schlups, or slip-outs. Despite speculation, their purpose remains a mystery. However, some of those tunnels have fireplaces and even vents, which might mean those were used primarily for shelter. Dating back to the Middle Ages, possibly as early as the 12th century, Erdstall tunnels lack archaeological signs and historical records, so it's not a surprise that there are many rumors about their use. Some scientists are sure those were storage spaces, though their narrowness makes this impractical. Another idea is that they provided hiding spots for farmers during tribal raids. However, their single entry point raises doubts about their effectiveness in evading threats. Now, if you're feeling like Indiana Jones and want to venture into those tunnels, you're in luck. A few structures, like the Erdstall Radkobluken in Austria, welcome visitors to explore these enigmatic structures. Most of them are closed to the public eye, though. The origins of Erdstall tunnels remain largely unknown, just like their real functions. And if you think, hey, it's the 21st century here, we can study pretty much everything, well, you're wrong. What makes these tunnels hard to study are the tight confines. Traditional surveying methods often prove inadequate in such spaces. To solve this problem, scientists use a handheld device that integrates an RGB camera, a gyroscope, and high-resolution depth sensors, allowing them to capture intricate details of the tunnels. They also use modern techniques like 3D surveying in hopes of uncovering the true origins and purposes of those tunnels. One hypothesis even suggests they may have been poorly conceived dwellings, abandoned when their inadequacies became apparent. Still, not everyone quite agrees with this idea. Other theories suggest they served spiritual purposes, while the most intriguing idea speculates that those tunnels may be remnants of extraterrestrial civilizations. Experts believe they may have been used for practical matters, such as granaries or hiding spots from looters. As we don't have exact info on who built it and when, it may be pretty much anyone, even a sloth. Nope, I'm not a lunatic. Sloths can build giant tunnels. Check this out. In 2009, a farmer in southern Brazil was driving his tractor through a cornfield when it suddenly sank into the ground. He quickly discovered he had broken through the top of an underground tunnel. When researchers came to investigate, they found a tunnel around 6.5 feet high and the same 6.5 feet wide, extending about 50 feet long, right beneath the farmer's house. When they looked closer, they instantly saw deep claw marks on the walls. That was the proof the tunnel wasn't human-made. So that thing the farmer uncovered was a megafauna paleoburrow, a prehistoric tunnel dug by ancient creatures like giant ground sloths or giant armadillos from over 10,000 years ago. I know, it's hard to imagine those beasts, but let me help you. Take a hamster. Now, increase it to the size of an elephant. Don't forget, this 13-foot-tall hamster could also walk on two legs. During their time, around 15 million to 10,000 years ago, many species of sloths and giant armadillos roamed the Americas, some even digging similar tunnels. Today, many of these tunnels are filled with sediment, though some remain clear, similar to the one the farmer discovered. This 2009 find sparked significant interest, leading to the discovery of over 1,500 paleoburrows across southern Brazil, making it the era with the highest concentration of such sites worldwide. But no one knows exactly why there are so many of them in southern Brazil. While some paleoburrows exist throughout South America, none have been found in North America, which is weird since those huge sloths roamed the entire continent. The exact purpose of these large tunnels remains a mystery, but scientists believe they may have served as nursing spaces, temperature regulation, or hibernation areas. Tunnels likely developed over centuries as successive generations of sloths and armadillos expanded them. Now, let's take a look at fugus. No, not the Japanese fatal delicacy, and no, not a town in New Guinea. To see them, we gotta travel to the UK. So fugus are underground structures too, but they don't look exactly like tunnels. They are dry stone structures. They look as if a cave had been decorated with stones from the inside. There are only around 15 of them found so far, and most of them are located in Cornwall. According to the estimates, those tunnels were built about 2,400 years ago, and they're still in pristine condition, which is truly fascinating. I mean, back in the day, people had no cool machinery whatsoever, yet their structures still last. And if you dare to buy an apartment today, well, chances are you won't be too happy about the quality. Going back to our fugus, there's nothing extraordinary about their supposed purpose. They could be used for spiritual purposes, as a place to hide, or a food storage. The latest application, though, is a bit weird. I guess it's not a secret for anyone that England is famous for its excessive humidity. And if you want to store your food properly, you gotta avoid the humidity at all costs. Otherwise, say welcome to mold and fungi. But ancient people weren't dull-witted at all, or they wouldn't have survived, and you and I wouldn't be around now. So they might have adapted those fugus to store just some products, those that already had natural molds in them, assisting in the preservation of perishable food, like milk, butter, and cheese. But hey, those are just speculations. The true reason why they were built remains unknown. What makes Fugus unique is that they are intentionally built tunnels, not just excavated mines like those in Wales. They were crafted by digging deep trenches, lining them with stone slabs, covering them with capstones, and then filling over them, all of which took significant time and effort. Still, no matter how hard those were to construct, cities around the globe are often built over intricate tunnel systems, each unique to its location. For instance, Paris is famous for its extensive underground quarries, which were abandoned years ago, but still pose a risk of collapse in certain areas above. London boasts one of the largest tunnel networks in the world, including many that were specifically created for military purposes. In New York City, there are rumors of secret tunnels, while Los Angeles has old tunnels from the Prohibition era used for speakeasies. Many other cities also have their share of enigmatic tunnels, and surprisingly, Florida is no exception. It happened in the year 2011 in Ybor City. Near a former post office, flooding uncovered something weird, a section of an unknown structure. Back then, people didn't pay much attention to that, so it took another 7 years to discover something truly fascinating. This historic neighborhood was founded in the 1880s, but it remained unknown until 2018 that it also has a hidden tunnel network. We only learned of it because of renovation work. The exact purpose, of course, is unknown, but most scientists are pretty sure that they serve to connect to early gaming spots and the port of Tampa. Figuring out how extensive the tunnel network is tricky. In 2018, a historic home in Seminole Heights revealed locked doors leading to tunnels from the 1920s. One local even said he traveled through a tunnel for 20 minutes. Rumors suggest some tunnels connect to the Hillsborough River and Ybor City. Research is ongoing, but no new info has emerged yet.
In November 1922, a boy walked through the desert mountains of Egypt and discovered some ancient steps carved into the rock. Subsequently, this find became one of the world's largest and most significant archaeological discoveries. This step was part of Tutankhamun's untouched tomb. Archaeologists found about 5,000 ancient objects, including jewelry, fabrics, painted vases, and funeral masks. You've probably seen one of them. It has become one of the most recognizable attributes of ancient Egypt. More than 100 years have passed since then, and now humanity has finally become close to another large-scale discovery, the tomb of Cleopatra. This queen was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, who sat on the throne from 51 to 30 BCE. There are many ancient records about Cleopatra, her reign, and her unusual personality, but until now, no one has discovered the secrets about her passing away in the burial place. So, one archaeologist, Dr. Kathleen Martinez, has been studying ancient records and temples around Alexandria for decades, and concluded that the tomb of the queen should be located under the ancient city of Taposiris Magna, founded in 280 BCE. It was a big city on the northern coast of Egypt, where tens of thousands of people were engaged in trade and industry, and it seems that Dr. Martinez's guesses turned out to be correct. She and a group of archaeologists have discovered a secret underground tunnel near Alexandria, with a length of about 0.8 miles. It was cut into the rock under Taposiris Magna's temple. During further excavations, they found many things that indicate Cleopatra's tomb lies in the tunnel's depths. It's also possible that she is buried there together with the Roman commander, Mark Antony. According to ancient records, Cleopatra and Mark Antony loved each other and together opposed the Roman Senate, which declared Antony a traitor. The fact that natural disasters have occurred on the territory of Taposiris Magna for thousands of years can complicate the excavations. Earthquakes and floods destroyed the city and possibly flooded its underground tunnels. But archaeologists hope the ancient tomb remains untouched, and that it hides many treasures and records about the royal life of ancient Egypt during the reign of the last dynasty. There's a chance that excavations will go underwater and in the mud. This will require much time and funding, but archaeologists are sure it's worth it. Anyway, it's too early to say that Cleopatra is really buried there, but scientists have found many things in the tunnel that confirm this, including clay pots, dozens of coins with the image of Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, as well as a bust with the image of the Egyptian queen. Cleopatra is still one of the most popular personalities in Egypt, on an equal footing with Ramesses III and Tutankhamun. She inspired many films, paintings, and books, but what made her so popular? She became famous for her inconsistency. She was a beautiful, intelligent ruler who pulled Egypt out of the crisis and made it a prosperous power. Medieval Arabic texts say she knew chemistry, mathematics, and philosophy, and may have written several scientific books. She knew several languages and had excellent diplomatic skills. At the same time, there are many legends that she was a femme fatale who drove many men crazy. However, there's no evidence that her beauty was incomparable. The image of a stunning model was created by Hollywood when it made several films where famous actresses performed the role of Cleopatra. And the Roman Emperor Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, specially created the image of Cleopatra as an insidious seductress because he was her enemy. Even though she was born in Egypt, Cleopatra wasn't an Egyptian. Her ancestors were Greeks, among whom was one of the generals of Alexander the Great. However, the people of Egypt loved her. She learned the language and was very sensitive to the traditions of this country. She knew the history, mentality, and customs of ancient Egypt well. She raised the level of its economy and strengthened its status as a world power. Much of this was made possible thanks to her cunning and impressiveness. She loved theatrical performances and lavish celebrations. She knew how to surprise people and put on a show. But behind the exterior image of a luxury lover was an intelligent and calculating ruler. Ancient Egypt was a rich, luxurious country, and Cleopatra did everything to increase its wealth and strengthen its position in the international arena. For example, she was once in conflict with her brother Ptolemy XIII. The queen knew that she wouldn't be able to resist him, so she decided to attract Julius Caesar to their side. The Roman emperor arrived in Alexandria, where Cleopatra wanted to meet him, but Ptolemy knew about her plans and was about to prevent her from coming to Caesar. Then, instead of a rich and noisy arrival, Cleopatra decided to make her visit inconspicuous. She wrapped herself in a carpet or linen bag the emperor's servants carried into Caesar's private chambers. Cleopatra emerged from the carpet and impressed the Roman emperor with her beauty and determination. As a result, they fell in love with each other and became close allies. After some time, she impressed another influential Roman for diplomatic purposes. She arrived to meet Mark Antony on a golden barge with purple sails and silver oars. Cleopatra was dressed in the image of Aphrodite and sat under a magnificent canopy. Her servants dressed like cupids and were blowing her fan and burning incense. But Cleopatra created such a show for a reason. She knew that Antony revered Greek mythology and considered himself the embodiment of Dionysus. As a result, he was so impressed with this woman that he ended up marrying her. Cleopatra defended her crown, strengthened her alliance with Rome, and bore Antony 3 children. In Egypt, they threw big parties and enjoyed wealth with power. However, the relationship of a high-ranking official with the Egyptian queen caused a scandal in Rome. Octavian was Antony's primary opponent in the struggle for power, so he exploited the situation to darken the competitor's reputation. He used propaganda to make Cleopatra an insidious seductress in the eyes of Roman citizens. He accused Antony of succumbing to her charms. The Roman Senate supported Octavian and declared Cleopatra an enemy. In 33 BCE, this conflict reached a high point when Antony's navy clashed with Octavian's fleet. The latter won and forced his enemy to flee to Egypt with Cleopatra. According to some records, they took refuge near Alexandria. Pursued by the Romans, they hid in one of Cleopatra's palaces and met their end. Some legends say that Cleopatra was an expert in poisons. She provoked a venomous snake, a viper or an Egyptian cobra, to bite her. Also, according to another legend, she pricked herself with a poisonous needle. There's a theory that Cleopatra always carried an ampule with poison inside her hairbrush. and when she was cornered, she soaked the needle with this poison and pricked herself. None of this can be said for sure. Scientists are still trying to find out the truth. Perhaps when they reach Cleopatra's tomb, the world will get more answers about her tragic fate. She is considered the last ruler of Egypt. After her passing, Octavian plundered her palaces and temples and returned to Rome, where he became the main emperor. He successfully ruled the country and expanded its borders. His reign ended when he turned 75. World history would have looked different if Cleopatra and Mark Antony hadn't lost that naval battle. By the way, did you know that more time has passed between Cleopatra's reign and Neil Armstrong's flight to the moon than between the reign of the Egyptian queen and the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza? Armstrong took a step on the Earth satellite in 1969, 38 years after the birth of Cleopatra. And the construction of the pyramid took place in 2560 BCE. Imagine how long the history of ancient Egypt is. Cleopatra is closer to us in time than to the pyramids.
The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learn to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's fresh water, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process.
There are entire communities of unusual tiny organisms that live in lagoons in Patagonia, and they are some of the first forms of life ever. No one had known about them until two scientists, Brian and Maria, went to explore certain areas in Patagonia. Now, Patagonia occupies nearly half of Argentina, and few people live there. Only some farmers and sheep ranchers that mostly stay near rivers and grow things such as apples, pears, and alfalfa. A long time ago, it was a wild and distant place where Indian tribes lived. But this time, we're going to follow the tracks of life forms that appeared long before humans and look closer at these interesting microorganisms Brian and Maria found. Those two had to drive for 9 hours on some rough roads to reach their destination. They stayed in a small village. Only 35 people live there. These people depend on just one spring because it almost never rains there. On the last night in the village, Brian realized that satellite images he had taken had shown a set of lagoons that were only 10 miles away. The next day, the small team jumped into a car and went up the road as far as they could until it became too difficult to drive. They continued hiking the rest of the way. It was hard because they had to carry water to deal with the intense sunlight. In some spots, they ended up sinking up to their knees in a slush made of salt. Up there were 12 lagoons with perfectly clear waters. The place itself didn't offer much except for very acidic and salty water and intense direct sunlight. But it was kinda like traveling back in time, because those conditions were like what Earth looked like many, many years ago. When Brian examined the lagoons, he was surprised to see many unusual microorganisms there. We call them stromatolites, and they're so small we can't even see them without a microscope. But they get together and form large communities. In the past, many unusual species lived this way. For example, cyanobacteria. They were important back in their time because they produced oxygen. Earth, in its initial stages, didn't have much of this gas in its atmosphere. The first stromatolites might have been formed by diverse types of bacteria that didn't necessarily produce any oxygen, but were just living their peaceful life there. They formed layers, piling on top of one another, so that at least some of them could get a bit of sunlight. They used sand and sticky liquids to stay close together. Brian was also incredibly surprised because those were the biggest living stromatolites he had ever seen. Living stromatolites usually grow to be over 3.3 feet high, but the newly found ones were 15 feet wide and a few feet tall, which is giant compared to those living in other places. And fossilized ones were even larger. A long time ago, they could grow bigger than today because there weren't many other species that could eat or harm them. Also, there are many other organisms today that can grow faster and more massive than them and take up their space. That's why stromatolites can only survive in rare places where hardly anything else can live, like in these very salty lagoons located high above sea level in Punta de Atacama. The stromatolites found there are the most famous ones because they might be some of the best examples of the earliest life on our planet. But they're not actually the first form of life on Earth. The oldest of their fossils are 3.5 billion years old, while some other evidence we have tells us that life on our planet appeared around 4.1 billion years ago. Maybe some stromatolites lived back then as well. But Earth has changed a lot since then, and the places where they might have lived haven't survived. Now, all this may not seem like a lot at first glance, because no one has found an exotic and weird beast our world has never seen. But these are notable examples of what searching for life somewhere else in the universe might look like. Scientists who are interested in studying Mars often come to this place, since it might be similar to what the red planet looked like an exceptionally long time ago. If there were fossils hidden in the ancient rocks on Mars, they might look like these stromatolites. Another faraway land has revealed some of its secrets. It's Antarctica, with an ancient lost world found under its ice. Antarctica hasn't always been this frosty, isolated land of snow and ice sheets. Once it used to be part of the Gondwana supercontinent, together with what is now South America, Africa, Australia, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Indian subcontinent. But at some point, it split off and went to build a life on its own. It formed as other landmasses started to move away, which created its coastline. But Antarctica was different in many other ways back then too. It used to be a land covered in magnificent forests and rivers full of life. Scientists use radar and satellites to explore a mysterious world hidden under the ice there. This ancient land, which is close to the Indian Ocean, is as big as the U.S. state of Maryland or Belgium. It's more than 14 million years old. Some studies say that this area formed over 34 million years ago, which was way before Antarctica got into its deep freeze. At first, temperatures there were higher, possibly like the weather in Patagonia or the cold, temperate rainforests of Tasmania, New Zealand, or maybe even more tropical than that. But as the climate became cooler, small glaciers started forming on hills close to the rivers. Valleys sunk deeper because of all that ice covering them. And then, temperatures dropped even lower, and a giant layer of ice covered the entire continent, hiding those old glaciers. Rivers shaped this lost world a long time ago, way before it ended up covered in ice that's almost 2 miles thick in some spots. Scientific studies of this area showed that those landscapes had been full of highlands and mountains. The ice that formed over Antarctica made the whole area very cold, so the landscape couldn't erode anymore. This means everything has remained basically the same and untouched under the ice for millions and millions of years. What's interesting is that we know less about this land hidden under the ice than about the surface of Mars. One way to explore it would be to drill through these ice sheets to check for samples of sediments below. They could tell us more about the ancient flora and fauna frozen underneath. It's not a new method. A similar method was used to collect 2-million-year-old samples in Greenland. Australia has a secret world too. Ancient organisms were found hidden in rocks in the northern parts of the continent that are about 1.6 billion years old. These microscopic things are part of a family called eukaryotes. The members of this family that exist today include plants, fungi, animals, and even those tiny organisms with just one cell, such as amoeba. All living things with nuclei in their cells, including us, can trace their family tree back to one of the oldest members of this family. That one is called the last eukaryotic common ancestor, and it lived more than 1.2 billion years ago. Those ancient organisms were more complex and bigger than bacteria. Maybe they were the first predators on Earth, hunting bacteria.
Hey, how do you feel about taking a trip back in time? We're diving into the history of the Amazon forest to unravel the mystery of its lost cities. Grab your bug spray and hop on. The Amazon forest is the world's largest rainforest. The environment there can be extremely challenging for human life. Yet, the legend goes that the Amazon has been home to sprawling settlements rich in unmeasurable wealth. Could that really be true? Or is that none other than a figment of our collective imagination? The legend of El Dorado might be the myth that started this whole thing. As European explorers began their excavations in American lands back in the 1500s, word got out of an Amazonian civilization that used to paint their leader in gold as an offering to higher powers. The legend of El Hombre Dorado, aka the Golden Man, began to quickly spread around Europe. Explorers got excited at the possibility of finding an infinite amount of gold somewhere deep within the Latin American jungle. And as you can imagine, expeditions to the continent began to multiply with each passing year. It didn't take long before explorers found this civilization. They were known as the Muisca people and were located in Colombia, near Lake Gudavia. The Muisca people had a tradition of painting their leader, aka the Zipa, from head to toe in gold. In a ceremonial gesture, the Zipa would swim into the river, spreading gold dust all over the lake. For the Muisca, this was their way of acknowledging and thanking the higher powers of the universe they believed in. When European explorers heard and witnessed this practice, they were amazed. For them, gold was used solely for commercial purposes as their main currency for trade. This made them think that the Muisca people must have stacks and stacks of gold hidden somewhere in the jungle for them to use it so abundantly. Well, that's how the legend of El Dorado was born. What was once the practice of El Hombre Dorado traveled on word of mouth until it became El Dorado, a fictional city that was most likely to hide piles of gold. The hunt for this city led Europeans to spend large amounts of money to scour the Amazon forest. Unfortunately, all of their expeditions came back empty-handed. That is, if they ever came back at all. Now, jump to the beginning of the 1900s. In England, the Royal Geographic Society, a prestigious British institution, was looking for somebody willing to travel down to Latin America to trace the border between Brazil and Bolivia. More specifically, the part of the border that is nestled deep within the Amazon rainforest. One Sir Percy Fawcett was a Latin American aficionado, and he gladly volunteered to do the job. Oh, it's important to note that the Amazon forest is virtually the size of the continental USA. It sprawls across 8 countries, including Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia. And trust me, getting around is no easy feat. The jungle is covered in dense vegetation, and in addition to that, it's home to insane predators such as anaconda snakes, panthers, crocodiles, piranhas, and so on. But despite all that, Fawcett was very successful in his mapping adventure and seemed to be wanting to come back more. Back in England, Fawcett would scour diaries from other explorers hoping to learn more about the ancient Amazonian civilizations. He would read about the Incas and the Mayans and the great empires they built. He believed that if the Incas were capable of building empires that stretched over 2 million square miles, this could mean that other Amazonian civilizations could have thrived there too. During his research, Fawcett came across a report from a 16th century explorer. The report told of a city deep within the Amazon forest that held unimaginable quantities of minerals, a town that stretched for 15 miles without any space from a house to house. This report fueled Fawcett's imagination to a new extreme. From then on, he became obsessed with finding what he called the lost city of Z. Over years, Fawcett searched the Amazon forest, usually looking for stone ruins that could possibly indicate human settlements. On his later expeditions, he focused on exploring the state of Mato Grosso in central Brazil. He would travel from Europe and into the lower region of the Xingu River. The trip to the Xingu would take him around 14 days on foot. Then, he would set sail in small wooden boats accompanied by local indigenous leaders that knew the region better than anyone. How he communicated with the indigenous population is still a mystery, since they only spoke in local dialects. Some scientists believe that this could have been the real reason why he never found the city. They believed he wasn't able to communicate what exactly he was looking for. And this was not his greatest difficulty. As we've said before, Amazon is not a kind place for its visitors. In his diaries, Fawcett tells of encounters with a 60-foot-long anaconda, which he bravely survived. He writes of endless sleepless nights and waking up with his hands and feet swollen from mosquito bites. Some of his peers said he was invincible and tireless, but the day came during his 8th expedition when he didn't make it back home. Fawcett disappeared without leaving any trace behind. Some even suspect that he was close to reaching his lifelong goal. On the day of his disappearance, he sent an optimistic letter to his wife saying there was nothing to fear, and that he was setting out on a certain final search. Fawcett's failed attempt to find ruins seemed to support what had become a consensus among experts at the time, that this rainforest was too inhospitable to support large, complex societies, let alone cities. Experts were convinced that the Amazon's lost cities were nothing more than fiction. That is, until the 1960s, when modern research began to find evidence that suggested otherwise. Scientists discovered patches of extremely fertile soil. They called it Black Earth. And apparently, they found lots of it in the Amazon, especially alongside rivers. Further research even showed that such soil was created by human waste or the intentional burning of forests, which adds nutrients to the soil below, which could only mean bingo! The discovery of Black Earth was the evidence that large-scale agriculture was possible and probably did exist amidst the Amazon, confirming that settlements could have formed there after all. In the 1990s, along the Xingsu River in Brazil, a team of archaeologists from the University of Florida made a remarkable discovery. Working alongside local indigenous people, they found very long ditches. After mapping them, they realized that these ditches were a sign of a big settlement. They were remnants of carefully designed walls centered around a plaza. Some were roads that led to more settlements. In fact, just this part of the Amazon, about the size of New Jersey, was once a network of dozens of settlements that experts believe could have been home to at least 50,000 people between 1250 and 1650 CE. Other discoveries were possible thanks to LiDAR imaging, a type of technology that allows researchers to take satellite pictures of the forest's ground without having to step inside of it. A network of trenches in Acre, Brazil, dates back to 200 to 1200 CE. These suggest settlements that could have supported 60,000 people. Other images from near the Xingu River suggest cities that could have housed about 50 million people. These were the lost cities of the Amazon. Believe it or not, these images suggest that Fawcett was very close to a major discovery. He was looking for the ruins in the right place, but he was looking for the wrong thing. Unlike cities such as Cusco, which used stone as their primary material, Amazonian settlements used wood and earth to build their cities. These materials are highly deteriorating and probably decomposed over time. Finding them required a bit more technology than what Fawcett had available at his time. Tunnels, metro, underground systems, and even secret passageways to the houses of the rich and famous. Why else do we need tunnels, you may wonder? To hide. Many cities have underground tunnels and even underground doppelgangers. Now let's make it clear. Those passages are normally not connected, contrary to the popular rumor claiming that it was possible to get from Scotland to Turkey using underground passageways built around 5,000 years ago. I mean, it sounds insane even today. Imagine building it back in the day. These tunnels have an official name, the Erdstall Tunnels, and they were most likely built in the Middle Ages. However, we still don't have the exact information about the date. The highest concentration of those tunnels are in Bavaria, Germany, but there are many of them in Great Britain and France too. Erdstall tunnels, a unique type of earthen passage found globally, are characterized by their narrow, oval-shaped corridors and tight choke points, known as schlups, or slip-outs. Despite speculation, their purpose remains a mystery. However, some of those tunnels have fireplaces and even vents, which might mean those were used primarily for shelter. Dating back to the Middle Ages, possibly as early as the 12th century, Erdstall tunnels lack archaeological signs and historical records. So it's not a surprise that there are many rumors about their use. Some scientists are sure those were storage spaces, though their narrowness makes this impractical. Another idea is that they provided hiding spots for farmers during tribal raids. However, their single entry point raises doubts about their effectiveness in evading threats. Now, if you're feeling like Indiana Jones and want to venture into those tunnels, you're in luck. A few structures, like the Erdstall Radkobluken in Austria, welcome visitors to explore these enigmatic structures. Most of them are closed to the public eye, though. The origins of Erdstall tunnels remain largely unknown, just like their real functions. And if you think, hey, it's the 21st century here, we can study pretty much everything, well, you're wrong. What makes these tunnels hard to study are the tight confines. Traditional surveying methods often prove inadequate in such spaces. To solve this problem, scientists use a handheld device that integrates an RGB camera, a gyroscope, and high-resolution depth sensors, allowing them to capture intricate details of the tunnels. They also use modern techniques like 3D surveying in hopes of uncovering the true origins and purposes of those tunnels. One hypothesis even suggests they may have been poorly conceived dwellings, abandoned when their inadequacies became apparent. Still, not everyone quite agrees with this idea. Other theories suggest they served spiritual purposes, while the most intriguing idea speculates that those tunnels may be remnants of extraterrestrial civilizations. Experts believe they may have been used for practical matters, such as granaries or hiding spots from looters. As we don't have exact info on who built it and when, it may be pretty much anyone, even a sloth. Nope, I'm not a lunatic. Sloths can build giant tunnels. Check this out. In 2009, a farmer in southern Brazil was driving his tractor through a cornfield when it suddenly sank into the ground. He quickly discovered he had broken through the top of an underground tunnel. When researchers came to investigate, they found a tunnel around 6.5 feet high and the same 6.5 feet wide, extending about 50 feet long, right beneath the farmer's house. When they looked closer, they instantly saw deep claw marks on the walls. That was the proof the tunnel wasn't human-made. So that thing the farmer uncovered was a megafauna paleoburrow, a prehistoric tunnel dug by ancient creatures like giant ground sloths or giant armadillos from over 10,000 years ago. I know, it's hard to imagine those beasts, but let me help you. Take a hamster. Now, increase it to the size of an elephant. Don't forget, this 13-foot-tall hamster could also walk on two legs. During their time, around 15 million to 10,000 years ago, many species of sloths and giant armadillos roamed the Americas, some even digging similar tunnels. Today, many of these tunnels are filled with sediment, though some remain clear, similar to the one the farmer discovered. This 2009 find sparked significant interest, leading to the discovery of over 1,500 paleoburrows across southern Brazil, making it the era with the highest concentration of such sites worldwide. But no one knows exactly why there are so many of them in southern Brazil. While some paleoburrows exist throughout South America, none have been found in North America, which is weird since those huge sloths roamed the entire continent. The exact purpose of these large tunnels remains a mystery, but scientists believe they may have served as nursing spaces, temperature regulation, or hibernation areas. Tunnels likely developed over centuries as successive generations of sloths and armadillos expanded them. Now, let's take a look at fugus. No, not the Japanese fatal delicacy, and no, not a town in New Guinea. To see them, we gotta travel to the UK. So fugus are underground structures too, but they don't look exactly like tunnels. They are dry stone structures. They look as if a cave had been decorated with stones from the inside. There are only around 15 of them found so far, and most of them are located in Cornwall. According to the estimates, those tunnels were built about 2,400 years ago, and they're still in pristine condition, which is truly fascinating. I mean, back in the day, people had no cool machinery whatsoever, yet their structures still last. And if you dare to buy an apartment today, well, chances are you won't be too happy about the quality. Going back to our fugus, there's nothing extraordinary about their supposed purpose. They could be used for spiritual purposes, as a place to hide, or a food storage. The latest application, though, is a bit weird. I guess it's not a secret for anyone that England is famous for its excessive humidity. And if you want to store your food properly, you gotta avoid the humidity at all costs. Otherwise, say welcome to mold and fungi. But ancient people weren't dull-witted at all. or they wouldn't have survived, and you and I wouldn't be around now. So they might have adapted those fugus to store just some products, those that already had natural molds in them, assisting in the preservation of perishable food, like milk, butter, and cheese. But hey, those are just speculations. The true reason why they were built remains unknown. What makes fugus unique is that they are intentionally built tunnels, not just excavated mines like those in Wales. They were crafted by digging deep trenches, lining them with stone slabs, covering them with capstones, and then filling over them, all of which took significant time and effort. Still, no matter how hard those were to construct, cities around the globe are often built over intricate tunnel systems, each unique to its location. For instance, Paris is famous for its extensive underground quarries, which were abandoned years ago, but still pose a risk of collapse in certain areas above. London boasts one of the largest tunnel networks in the world, including many that were specifically created for military purposes. In New York City, there are rumors of secret tunnels, while Los Angeles has old tunnels from the Prohibition era used for speakeasies. Many other cities also have their share of enigmatic tunnels, and surprisingly, Florida is no exception. It happened in the year 2011 in Ybor City. Near a former post office, flooding uncovered something weird, a section of an unknown structure. Back then, people didn't pay much attention to that, so it took another 7 years to discover something truly fascinating. This historic neighborhood was founded in the 1880s, but it remained unknown until 2018 that it also has a hidden tunnel network. We only learned of it because of renovation work. The exact purpose, of course, is unknown, but most scientists are pretty sure that they serve to connect to early gaming spots and the port of Tampa. Figuring out how extensive the tunnel network is tricky. In 2018, a historic home in Seminole Heights revealed locked doors leading to tunnels from the 1920s. One local even said he traveled through a tunnel for 20 minutes. Rumors suggest some tunnels connect to the Hillsborough River and Ybor City. Research is ongoing, but no new info has emerged yet.